On today's episode, we are exploring the contrasting and overlapping perceptions of women in Eastern and Western societies through the lenses of religion, culture, and history. We will discuss influential female figures, highlight examples from the Quran and the Bible, and examine how women have shaped societies from the Middle East to India and Africa. This conversation around women's roles, both historical and modern, is a shared human story. Across continents and faiths, women have led, nurtured, and reshaped societies. By comparing the East and West, we are seeking to uncover the deeper truth behind how civilizations perceive and value womanhood. Welcome back to another episode of Chatting with Slava the Jordanian. I'm your host, STJ, and we are back with our panel, Dr. Ihab Abdurrahim, and my one and only, my co-host, JD Yusuf. So on today's episode, since JD Yusuf has done most of the research, I am gonna bring him in to start us off.
Thank you, Dr. Salva, Dr. Ihab, our listeners and our viewers as well. Thank you so much. I guess to piggyback off of what Dr. Salva's started out with, I have a cultural perspective, East versus West, and I guess we could start the discussion. Some points: in many Eastern societies, women were respected as custodians of family honor and spirituality, but often limited in public life, a balance shifting in modern times. To that point, it's interesting because, you know, in our community, specifically the Arab Christian community, we see that the women have or hold on to the faith a lot stronger and a lot more than our men. Of course, it's, you know, it's different dynamics. It's a work-life balance, but generally speaking, the male is usually always working. It's just kind of what it is, what it's been relegated to. Arab Christian communities historically produced strong female figures in literature and education, such as May Ziadeh, who led intellectual salons in the early 20th century. Western Christianity evolved towards emphasizing individualism, which gradually led to feminist movements, but also different family dynamics. Sure, we can probably piggyback off of points like that as well. In India, figures like Rani Lakshmi of Chihasna become symbols of resistance and female strength during British colonialization, and forgive me if I butchered those names. African matriarchal societies such as the Akan or in Ghana and the Yoruba in Nigeria have long traditions of female chiefs and queen mothers, and also later on in the podcast have some kind of beautiful examples of these key figures that we can kind of name, talk about, and just kind of bring to light. I think that's beautiful. But with that being said, Dr. Slava, Dr. Ihab, do you guys want to pick up some of these?
So you just tapped into the traditional gender role expectations. You just mentioned that, which I did not know. In Christian culture, you said the women or females are a lot more religious than men.
Yeah, that's just my, what I've seen, and I think people can also identify with that as well. But I guess the faith is more stronger with the females than it is in the males, and again, maybe it's just because what I've seen, from a Palestinian Lebanese perspective, again, always seeing the male out of the household, working 24/7. So, but yeah, so.
So let's expand on that. Is it because, the traditional role of a female as a mother, as a sister, as a grandmother, they're spending more time at home with the children, and their responsibilities, one of their responsibilities is to transfer that power, that religious power, to the offsprings or the kids, and make sure that those kids are well educated in the faith or in the religion of that community. Does that make sense? You think that's where that stems from?
That's actually a very good point. Given the instability in our region, right? So, I think the male figure was a little bit more volatile, where the female role was a little bit more cemented, right? Like, I can speak about my grandfather's, perspective. He did construction all over the Middle East. So he was sending money back home. He was never home. Every time he went back home, I think, that's where, I have 7 aunts and uncles. So every time he visited back home, we had, and it was like a year or 2 years, he would come out of the blue, and, that's just how it was. It was, it was very unstable, especially in our countries as well. We kind of had to go outside. But yeah.
So just to clarify for our listeners and our viewers, so your grandfather worked construction back in Blad in Palestine.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So and then he distributed his income or his fortune to the rest of the family. So he was responsible for the family, and that's a lot of pressure. Again, it's the traditional gender role expectation that, you're the man in the house, you're the head of the family, and you're supposed to support everybody else. So because of that, your grandfather was out of the picture, which is the homemaking picture, spending a lot of time with the children. And of course, the women figure in your family had to compensate and fill that void. So I've seen it in my mom, because my dad, the reason I'm mentioning, because my dad traveled a lot, it's the same gender role expectations that he had to provide for his family as much as possible. And he did send money to Jordan all the time to help the rest of the family, that the rest of the family members, they are, less fortunate than others. So because of that, my mom became the father, the paternal and the maternal figure in our, family model in our house. So when my dad came back from his travels, he did not have the same impactful presence as my mom. My mom was the authority. My mom was the, supplier of food, supplier of comfort, emotional stability, well-being, regulations. She was a teacher too, so she taught us everything: religion, language, math, science, culture, history. So she was the source of it all. And then when my dad came in, that was the power struggle. My dad wanted presence. Like, he didn't want a presence as an authority. He wanted a presence like, the kids are not sharing stuff with me. I'm not sure. He used to call me. He goes, "How old are you?" After he retired, I was in high school. I'm like, "Dad, I'm freshman high school." He goes, "Okay, how old is your brother?" He just lost track of it all, that after he retired, for him to piggyback and try to catch up with that, we were not very cooperative. And until this day, I regret that. My dad has passed in 2014. I regret that I did not spend enough time in giving him benefit of the doubt, that his inquisitive manner was not because he was doubting or because he did not care. And I looked at him as a figure like, you don't care, you just travel, you always working. I guess we're not priority. So if I'm not a priority to you, you're not a priority to me. So I didn't give him the benefit of the doubt that it's like, no, I need to spend this 15, 20 minutes trying to converse with my dad and rebuild that connection and that relationship. But I was very short with him because I blamed him for that. Of course, as a child or high schooler, I didn't really understand the reality of it. But that is really interesting because my mom is educated, highly educated. My dad is highly educated. But when it came to the dynamics of the home, like you said, as Arabs, we still play upon that traditional model of, my mom worked while my dad was traveling, but she still somehow, I don't know how she did it, she fulfilled that role, 80% of the parenting role, while my dad, even was around, and 100% of the parenting role when my dad was not around. So it almost like that kind of dynamic, so that kind of arrangement shunted my dad out of the kid's relationship, to the point like when he got in his 60s, my mom allegedly used to catch him crying. And he ended up seeing a therapist, my dad saw a therapist about this, because he used to tell her when she asked him, what's wrong? Why are you crying? Are you in pain? He goes, no, I'm trying to reflect on my kid's childhood and I don't remember much of it. And that made me very sad. So so I just wanted to elaborate on that point, because I'm going to bring Dr. Ehab in to also talk about whether that model existed in his childhood or not.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Ever wonder what top-tier financial strategists leveraging the power of AI are actually thinking? Welcome to What's Kenna French Thinking, a deep dive into the mind of a #1 Amazon best-selling author, co-hosted by Kenna French and Elaine Mingus. We're bringing you industry titans such as Sharon Lechter of Rich Dad, Poor Dad fame, Laurel Langmeyer from The Secret, and real estate mogul Ron LeGrand. We view the world through the lens of AI, advanced tax strategy, and high-level business with a ton of fun to boot. Search What's Kenna French Thinking on Spotify, Apple, Buzzsprout. Start thinking bigger. Find out what Kenna French is thinking today.
So, hello everybody. The traditional gender roles we're talking about, current versus, my one generation back with my parents, for instance. I'll talk a little bit about my parents first. There was the idea of, my mom tried to work for a little bit, but she ended up staying home and taking care of me. And my dad was the person that was the breadwinner that worked. And, he worked a lot. He worked, regular hours, overtime hours, weekend hours. He just kept on working to make money to take care of us. And at the same time, my mom's taking care of me at home. So, you kind of look at it as like that older mentality of, the spouses and the father figure taking care of the family. So I believe, and this is something that's very interesting. It happened in the United States, and I know it's happening in Egypt now, and probably started happening maybe 10 years ago. One of the causes, I believe, of women getting into the workplace and working, and you have two parents working now, the father and the mother, and the work is because the world is changing. It's becoming more expensive, and that's the reason why a lot of the mothers are going to work now, and now they're a very large force in the workplace, which is great. And the thing is, I think it's probably a good way to look at it, that they're doing this, but also, how does that affect the children now? That the parents aren't home, or at least the mom isn't home during the day with the child like they used to be maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. I always think about that and see, like, well, is it affecting these younger kids as they grow up, that they don't have the parents around, or at least one of the parents around for a longer amount of time, that both parents are now working, and they just come home, they sit with their kids for like a couple of hours, and then, the whole thing starts the next day. The kids go to school or to go to daycare or whatever it might be, and the parents go to work. So, the traditional gender roles have kind of broken down now in the current situation and the current times. And I see that when I went to Egypt, I kind of noticed that both the men and the women, these youngsters now, my cousins, are getting married, and they're going to get engaged in December. Sorry. and they're both going to be working, right? They have no children yet, obviously. They're not married yet, but they're both already, one is working as a pharmacist. He owns his own pharmacy. And my cousin's going to be working at a job also for an insurance company for medications. So in any case, I think a lot of it changes. Current changes are due to financial situations where it doesn't make sense anymore for one of the parents to stay home. It does happen still, but most of the time now I notice that I'd say 80% of the time that both parents are working, and sometimes they work long hours depending on where they work. So I think that affects the family dynamics a little bit. And we did talk a little bit about going back, and we talked about these different tribes in Africa and in Christianity. But I do want to go back and talk about the past, how women's roles were. And I don't know if we want to go down that road, but that's one of the roads I was thinking about, like how their roles were back, a couple hundred years ago. I think in Europe, and with respect to Christianity, women were more suppressed, if I'm not mistaken. And in some other countries, women were, like African countries, women fought in in wars with the men. I think in Islam is the same way. Slava can correct me if I'm wrong. I might be wrong on that. But there was a male suppression of women back then, but now it's not like that. It's more an equal kind of opportunity, the current time. So, I don't know. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
One point that I have briefly, and I'll let Dr. Salva take it away, is, the Western, when we think of Christianity, we can't think of it in, just this one, a sphere. So there's an Eastern and a Western way of thinking, right? Something that resonates with me after hearing you speak is one thing that we do in our church, Eastern spirituality, like we don't have like the father who walks the bride up to the altar when she gets married. And a lot of people think that's weird or how could you, but the priest will explain that that's actually like a Western construct because the woman was a piece of property and she was viewed and treated as such,
Yes.
And so,
Yeah.
in the East, what we do in the marriage, we have the husband and wife who open the door together and walk down together. And then, the father will kiss them at the door, before, but yeah. So anyway, Dr. Slava.
No, I agree with you because funny enough, that's how me and Ehab did it at our wedding.
How beautiful.
Yeah, we went in together.
How beautiful.
Yes. We walked in together, and then the parents, when the dancing started, then the parents come in and the family come in and they greet you and give you kisses on the cheek and they pray for you and they bless you and all that. But that's how we did it. The adaptation of that concept, it's funny enough when you look on social media, affluent families from Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, it is the giveaway bride custom that's been adapted into the Eastern culture. I don't know why is that. I agree with you. I don't know if they realize, as you said, the reason why a male escorts the bride down the aisle from her side of the family, it's giving away the male's property. Thank you for purchasing basically the property, because different cultures either, when the man marries the woman, he gets her dowry, or when vice versa, the family, the groom's family pay actually what we call it mahar to the bride's family. But it's fascinating. I never thought that our Eastern culture is going to adapt such a concept, because we are all about empowering women. In my culture, at least, that's how I grew up. So I would like to dig a little bit deeper into the social structures that allowed and tolerated women's leadership through history, especially in Islam, because I think the stereotype, everybody, when it says, a Muslim, they think of the Taliban in Afghanistan. Oh, you guys got a cover. You must be real nice being here. Now you're free. You're being liberated. And I'm like, no. Afghanistan's Islam is different than Jordan Islam, is different than the secular, culture and society of Egypt. Mm-hmm. So different than how Turkey does it, so different than Iran does it. So what I would like the audience and the viewers to understand and realize that Islam is a religion. How you structure the traditional gender expectation with Islam comes from the culture of that country. It has nothing to do with Islam. Absolutely has nothing to do with Islam. Again, as a reminder, my education up to high school was within the extreme Wahhabism education of Saudi Arabia. And nothing but Wahhabism is a Bedouin culture that has been dressed upon the faith of Islam. The Egyptian culture has been dressed around the faith of Islam. The Turkish culture, same thing. The Iranian, the Persian culture, Persians, as the Persian Empire had ancient culture. So when they accepted and embraced Islam, Islam became the faith. But when you look at their food, look at their views about women, look at their views about their sovereignty, it's back to the Persian Empire. Same thing with Egypt, the way it protects itself and the way the government is set up is just like the ancient Egyptian, like in the Pharaoh time with the faith of Islam. So the world needs to recognize and differentiate between, my faith is Islam, but my culture is Jordanian Palestinian. Ihab's faith is Islam, but his culture is Egyptian. Yusuf's faith is Christianity, but his culture is Palestinian. So the Arab identity, right, is a combination, and it is a very tricky balance between our cultural obligation and our faith, right? Because remember, our culture existed before our faith. It's an ancient culture. Then Islam entered our world, right? Because we're all Semites, right? So all the tribes of Arabia, where my ancestor comes from, we come from Syria, all the tribe of Levantine, they were all Jewish tribes before Sayyidina Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, right? So that culture just got simulated within the tradition. That's why we have so many similarity in how we celebrate our holidays, how we treat each other, how we value family dynamics between the Jewish and the Christian faith, because at the end of the day, we are all Arabs, right? Has nothing to do with faith. The Arabic culture and the Arabic belief, the Arab belief system. Remember, an Arab is everybody that identify or consider their mother language is Arabic. We speak the language, but we are Levantine, we are North African, we are Yemenis, we are Indian, we are Asian, we are Mongolian, we are, Kazakhs, we are Turkish, we're Ottoman, we're Fatimiyin, we're Mamalik, right? So we are all that, but we spoke Arabic because when Islam entered, everybody had to learn Arabic to read the Quran. Right? So we have, for example, a team member that he's from Pakistan that works with us. He can read Arabic and he can recite when he talks to me the blessings in Arabic, and he understands what it means. But can I speak to him in Arabic? Would he understand it? No, absolutely not. He speaks Urdu and he speaks Hindi, but he can understand when I say, Salaam alaikum, Alhamdulillah, right? He can read that, but that's it. That's his limitation, because he had to learn that in order to embrace Islamic faith. I just want to clarify that point for whatever it's worth to our audience and our viewers before we pick it up again. So let's go over, like I said, the social structures and the social tolerance that allowed women leadership, whether in the Islamic world, which is the Eastern world, as far as we're concerned, and also in the Western world. So one of the examples that I remember which it was so impressive when I learned in Saudi Arabia through history that I don't remember which battle, that the Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam, they were fighting a battle, and all of a sudden he looked up the hill, and one of his daughters, she was an archer, she ran up the hill and she started fighting with all the men. He did not disown her. He did not yell at her. He did not punish her after the fact. He supposedly, from what I remember, he was so proud of her that he was tearing. He was so overwhelmed with pride that he was just so emotional, Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam. But let's bring JD Yusuf in so we can go over some of the impressive data that we have collected.
Yes. So, and thank you for that clarification. And I think that 50,000 foot view is kind of necessary as well, just because I guess there's a lot of misinformation out there with the media and, as you can imagine. But here are some examples of some strong female figures, stretching from, again, Eastern figures, Middle East to Al-Hind, India. For the Middle East, Khawla bint al-Azwar, she's a 7th century Islamic warrior who fought in early Muslim conquest, specifically the Battle of Yarmouk, and led troops. She's remembered in Arab historical narratives and modern retellings. Zenobia of Palmyra, and this is one that I remember from undergrad, a 3rd century Arab queen. I believe there's still a statue of her right outside of Latakia, if I'm not mistaken. An Arab queen who expanded Palmyrene control across Egypt and parts of Asia Minor, upward modern day Turkey, and led military campaigns against Roman authority until her defeat by Emperor Aurelian. She is an enduring regional symbol of female rulership and resistance. Shajar al-Dur, 13th century Egyptian, originally a slave consort, she later became the de facto ruler sultana of Egypt and played a major role in the transition of Mamluk rule, including during the 7th Crusade. And that's actually new to me. That's actually really cool. In the Levant and Egypt, Christian communities produced powerful women at times, patrons, queens, abbesses. The cultural contrast often lies not in scriptural prohibition, but in local social norms, to Dr. Slava's point. Some Eastern Christian traditions historically, let's see. Yeah, okay. Let's go to India and South Asia. Going back to Rani and that's R-A-N as in Nancy, Rani of Jhansi, Jhansi, 19th century. She led troops and fought British forces during the Indian Rebellion of 1857, a powerful symbol of female marital courage and resistance. Also, Nzinga Mbande, which is she's from modern day Angola, 17th century, skillful politician, military leader who resisted Portuguese colonization and used alliances to protect her kingdom. She is celebrated as a resilient warrior queen. I Ironically, I think Angola is the only African country that still speaks Portuguese. It's the only one in Africa. This one, I also remember Kandake or Candace, Queen of Kush, Merowe, just south of Egypt. Powerful queen, motheress, ruler of ancient Nubia. She's actually referenced in the New Testament. Queen of Ethiopians in Acts, but this African queen resisted Roman rule, and yeah, those are some of the examples, Dr. Slava, that are very powerful.
Yeah, I don't. I think a lot of people. First of all, as a Muslim, we do recognize Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam. هو المهدي المنتظر, meaning that he's the one that's coming back and he's going to save us all, save all humanity. But Sittana Maryam alayhi salam, his mom, we do recognize her as a saint, actually. So she is the first person that actually delivered the prophecy of Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, because, you know, she got pregnant and then God told her, that's what we believe, that God told her that, you know, when she got closer to labor, he enchanted this a tree that produced so many dates, and come to find out, dates, and up to this day, we give dates to mothers in labor because dates has so many fibers and also has a chemical that relaxes the muscles and to help you through labor. So she fed on dates until she delivered Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam. And dates grow in the summer, not in the winter. So that's why, as a Muslim faith, we believe Sayyidina Isa was born in the summer, but yet, you know, the Christian culture celebrated the birth of Jesus in Christmas. So, but that's just a little side note. But Sittana Maryam, she is the first acknowledged in our faith, in our religion, our culture, as the leader of that prophecy. Because Sayyidina Isa, when she introduced him to her town and her people, and they were accusing her of, you know, of relations, and who is this child, who's the father, you know, God forgive me, but they called him a bastard, and that's why the first miracle of Sayyidina Isa, when he spoke as an infant to protect and defend his mother, that's how holy Sittana Maryam is, that God actually sent the miracle of speech to an infant to protect her, instead of just letting her be accused of such sin. So that's the first figure of a female figure that Islam really taught us, that, you know, she earned respect and she was bestowed by God on the mission of having Sayyidina Isa as one of the prophet and delivering his message as, you know, as a miracle. So again, the misconception is, you know, Arab women and Middle Eastern women are very acknowledged as as leaders, as warriors in some instances in our history, a religious pillar of strength, right? But the interesting is, as we walk through history, that for some reason got suppressed, right? And got denied. I was like, no. There's no such thing. Islam always discriminate against women and women's role, and they don't believe in their even existence, you know, some cultures. But again, that's cultural. That's not religion. I cannot clarify this any more than it just look at the culture, don't look at the religion. Because when I talk to you, to JD Yusuf, when I talked to Dr. Ehab, and I lived with my mother-in-law, and my mom was a very strong figure, and she was she was more than capable to accomplish a lot more than what my dad accomplished, but she did not seek that route by choice. Right? It's too complicated for me to even get into that. And the same thing with my mother-in-law, because I spend a lot of time with her. She's very, very strong. I love both of them, my in-laws, but my mother-in-law was 100 times stronger than my father-in-law emotionally. Definitely. She was his emotional anchor for sure. Yeah, he was stronger and he was the provider and he was like, the man of the house that bring the food, but she was more than capable because I observed her when she was by herself without him in the picture, and she can handle herself and she can manage herself, and she is very influential and she's very impactful on a lot of people that actually owe her that favor. And they used to tell me that even after she passed, if it wasn't for Tante Ikram, I wouldn't been a doctor. If it wasn't for Tante Ikram, I would never met my husband and had happy marriage. If it wasn't for Tante Ikram, I would have probably ended up in a worse relationship. If it wasn't for for Tante Ikram, my marriage would have had completely collapsed, right? So even though she was not, didn't have a PhD, didn't have a master's, didn't finish college, she wasn't like, she had a big position like a CEO or a president of a company on the corporate, right, level. She did not achieve what other women achieved, but in her little micro model of community, she has impacted so many people. And in her success achievements, emotional, social, cultural, within those families, the list goes on and on and on and on. And may she rest in peace. When she passed away, the crowd that showed up to her burial was overwhelming emotionally. But I would like to bring Dr. Ihab in on that one.
Yes, I remember my mom growing up. So her interactions and her ability to talk to the women, the friends of hers, and the women in our circle that we had in Jersey City, even in Egypt too. But I kind of experienced it in New Jersey. I used to see it actually. She would sit with, someone who's going to, like Slava said, is going to be going to med school, and she would sit with her, and this person would go, "Oh my God, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to make it or get into med school." She would talk to them, said, "Listen, you can do this. It can, you have it, the ability. You don't need anybody else. You have your intelligence." So she would kind of really build this person back up again and kind of push them out of the nest again and say, "Okay, go for it. You can do this." And they would do it. And I remember times when people would have marital problems, and they would sit with my mom, and my mom would kind of really help resolve the problem, not the full problem, but help the women through it and come up with ideas on how to interact with their husbands and resolve it with them, rather than kind of all of a sudden they fight these couple fights and they separate and they would get divorced. That's kind of the worst case scenario, but I don't ever remember that happening. My mom was always there as a support structure for these friends of hers, and she was very, very good at it. Very good. There's a psychology that she used, and she wasn't educated. So it was something she gained over time, and experience and wisdom she had from, her life that she went through, and the things she saw in Egypt before she left and what she saw here in the United States. She took that and helped these women through their these times, these difficult times they had, and they came out of this, and I don't remember anybody coming out of it in a bad way. Everybody emerged in a very good, happy solution came out of it for them. And I'd watch it, and they would be very thankful, and that's why the people that came to her funeral were devastated when they saw her when she passed away. So it was tough. It was a tough situation to watch, but I at the funeral was tough, but I also saw how much people cared for her at that funeral and how much they will miss her discussions, basically her voice talking to them. So, but yeah.
No, yeah. I agree with you, but I don't know if you remember, she didn't only speak to the women in her community. She spoke to a lot of the men. And some of the men were even older than her. And when she spoke, this calm kind of persona came. They didn't argue with her. They didn't say, how dare you talk to me? You're a woman. You don't know anything. They don't make eye contact, and they lower their head as if a teacher is talking to them or lecturing them. And also they believed that she spoke wisdom, and logic. She was the true life coach, that life was her school, life was her institute. But the way she conducted herself, the way she delivered her message, it definitely influenced a lot of people, impacted a lot of people's lives. So the reason why we're mentioning my mother-in-law, because she is just a tiny little figure that is in the in that society that influenced so many people. I can't even imagine if my mother-in-law had pursued higher education and was on the, on a global level, lecturing all around the world, or even lecturing all around different states and impacting people. That would have been so powerful. But obviously her destiny was, limited to her community. But it's a legacy that she definitely leaves behind until this day. I mean, she passed, may she rest in peace, Allah yarhamha wa yahsin ilayha. She passed in 2016. And every time I mention her name, just you see the look on people's faces, the sadness and the nostalgic, emotions about her presence. Her presence was very, very powerful. And it's one of the few women in my life that I've seen that actually, like I said, achieved that without any education, except going through life, basically. But it's because she cared. She cared about people. Hab was so humane that even when I used to walk with her around New York City, if she saw a person that's yelling at another person, she will actually step in and say, you cannot talk to that person that way. I'm like, Hab, what if he has a gun? What if he has a knife? It's none of your business. She goes, no, if they take my life away, it was worth it. I'm like, oh my God, don't even say that. So, but that's how she is. She was fearless. She was strong. She was confident. My God, she oozed confidence. She was, her laughter and her voice just echoed through the living room, or if we're in a restaurant and everybody listened. Just, she had that power over people. But yeah, she's through history. I encourage everybody that has any doubt that women leadership role did not, whether it did or did not exist through the history of Islam or the Arabian empires, to dig a little bit deeper. And there's so many examples of that, and it's very, very, very inspiring. So let's bring JD Yusuf in. Do you have a female figure or model that really impacted your life?
Certainly my mother and my grandmother, naturally. My grandmother, who's since passed away as well. But you guys are talking about, you're hearing about Dr. Yab's mother and also your mother, Dr. Slava. It's to me, it's not really an education thing, because my grandmother didn't have a proper education. She had to leave school in like 7th or 8th grade to take care of her siblings because of her parents passed away. And so she now became that matriarchal figure on top of having children at the same time as raising her siblings. So, what they saw, they were able to teach. And that's something that you can't get from a classroom. And I think that's the most kind of powerful lessons and stories that, you can learn from. But yeah, I'll leave it at that. I can go on.
That is beautiful. Just as a reference, there is a whole surah, which is chapter in the Quran. It is titled Surah An-Nisa. So it is the chapter of women. I encourage everybody, just like as a historical book, as a documentary book. I'm not asking you guys to read it, to convert, just to read it, translate it, and make sure it's a high quality translation, because you have so many different translations, you might get the wrong message. Is to read the chapter Surah An-Nisa in the Quran. It's such a beautiful chapter. But no, I agree with you. It's amazing. Doesn't matter whether you're out of an Islamic faith or Christian faith or even a Jewish faith. Like I said, my dad had a really good friend who was Iraqi Jewish that lived in Germany or Austria. I think it's Austria. That you can't tell, I'm saying the dynamics are the same, the culture is the same, the way they go about, respecting women. She's the matriarch of the family. She is, even if she was a homemaker, it doesn't really matter. Arabian culture really admires women role in the family, and even though they are not put up front leading, they are leading behind the scenes. Trust me. They are the one that making everything happen, influencing a lot of decisions, paving the way to things to happen. But unfortunately, like J.D. Yusuf, I mentioned, the Western social media and unfortunately there are gaps in history that took that empowerment of women through the Islamic era or the Islamic empires and just suppress that. And again, we spoke about this a lot in so many episodes, as if like humanity didn't want to pick up where everybody else left off. We had to start all over, like went back to Dark Ages, mistreat women. Then it's like, okay, that's not a good way. There is a better way. And then we start all over again. And then another civilization comes in, or another religion come in, or whatever, another empire comes in. It's like, okay, we're going to just throw this out of the window. No more rights, no more equal opportunity, no more tolerance, because we're going to start all over again. But can you imagine if the human culture and society have actually picked up where other civilization has ended and built on that? Where would women leadership be today? Seriously, politically, spiritually, financially, empowerment. We would have been so advanced, but unfortunately, humanity sometimes master its mistakes instead of learning from its mistakes. And there are so many examples around the world right now that's happening that you guys, I feel like saying, you guys never learn. You guys never learn. And it's almost like when I talk to some of my team members trying to teach them something and they just ignore it or discard it, or, they don't want to consider it, and you watch them stumbling, right? It's very entertaining, stumbling, and then they come back and they say, "Oh, Dr. Slava, I don't know what happened." Well, you did not really learn, you're mastering your mistakes. You're not learning from your mistakes. But it is a very powerful concept to empower women, because I just feel that we see things differently. I'm not saying we're better. We're just different. And I wish society taps into the ability of how we look at things differently in order to learn from them and help humanity prosper and help humanity advance and help humanity improve. Because think about it, through history, and JD Yusuf can correct me if I'm wrong, there is no women leader have ever declared war or destroyed lives or civilizations. Am I correct or am I wrong?
You're saying declared a war, right? Declared. Nobody. I mean, there were women that fought in wars, right? But none declared.
Yeah. She's talking about offense, and no, I don't think there have been any leaders of that nature. Strictly in defense, and historically, they've actually been like pretty good leaders. Like it's kind of wild that we actually have this conversation, because there's some things that are just has no gender. Like, I don't understand why we have to put, a gender to things. Like, it was never like that. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of jump in and say something here. Probably, Dr. Saul, you talked about this, and, Yusuf, you mentioned it too. Christianity versus Islam, how women, were really, put into positions, whether they fought in wars or they led civilizations or whatever it might be. I really think it's that cultural, societal, male taking over because of their strength, but way back when. But I again, Yusuf, you were talking about Christianity in the Arab world and versus I was talking about Christianity in Europe and how they suppress women, and it was kind of the opposite for Christianity. So, and again, right, the Taliban. We're talking about the Taliban now, how they suppress women versus Egypt, for instance. Women are in the police force, are in the military. It's not like they're you're a woman, you can't do any of that. You can't do that. So that mindset is gone, right? So you have that. Like Slav always says, that unlimited mindset has opened up for women across the world, whether it be because they need to get into the workforce, or it's already been like that maybe with the East, right, versus the West. Even the United States was like that back in the 50s, the 40s, the 30s. There were, women were, I don't even think they were allowed to vote, if I remember correctly. I can't remember what year it was, but it wasn't like any time, like, 50, 60 years ago, women were allowed to vote. I don't think they were allowed to vote till, I want to say the 50s or 60s. I don't know, Yusuf, if you remember, I don't remember the exact date, but it was like 50. When somebody says 50s, 1950s, 1960s, that's not long ago. That's not a long time. I mean, what? Less than 100 years or something, 70, 60, 70 years, whatever it might be. But, that's, and we're talking about the United States, right? Where, it was like, wow, this country is supposed to be free. You could do whatever you want. We come to the United States, everybody thinking like that. But it was actually, when you came to the United States back then, it was only the men that were free. The women weren't allowed to be free. You're basically, property, right? Just like in Europe, right? I mean, it's not like Europe, when they came from Europe in the 1700s here, that Europe was, oh wow, it's so progressive. It wasn't. Europe was not progressive. They just brought it with them here, and they just made them property, same way as slaves were here. They were just a little notch above the slavery, to be honest with you, in the United States. They're not given that freedom to do. I don't even think they could own land, to be honest with you. In Europe back then, and I don't believe the United States, they were allowed to own land as well. So it's funny how people now here look at the Arabs or the Muslims in the Arabian Peninsula or Africa, like, oh, they're covering their heads, the women are mistreated, and it's really not the case that women are not being forced to do anything. They're choosing to do these things. It's a choice that they make, which is great. Everybody gets, you know what? Everybody gets a choice to do whatever they want. And it's not fair to say, oh, this person's covering their head. The males in this society are kind of suppressing them and mistreating them and beating them. And hey, that's not really happening in for the most part in the Arab countries. And there are societies, like you had explained, Slava, the Taliban and Afghanistan, how they treat their women. It is not proper, I don't think. And they're still being treated like property there and second-class citizens. But again, it's society, it's a culture, it's who they are, and they haven't come out of that world yet, which a lot of the countries have emerged. Europe has come out of that, obviously. The United States has come out of it. And the Arab world was not really in it in that way, whether it be Islam or Christian, from what we discussed just now. So it's funny. It's not really, to me, it's not religious. I believe it's against societal, cultural, and they use religion in a way to pick and choose to suppress the women. Back in the day, and even now in some countries. So that's kind of my thought on it. And that's kind of, I'll leave it at that. So,
well, some of the arguments saying that if women were qualified, or if women qualify, or they are worth, the religion, basically, why there were no female prophets, right? So that's one of the arguments that I had to learn in Saudi Arabia to debate in the debate class.
I think to be honest with you, in Islam, if I remember correctly, I might be wrong. I think Mary was a prophet, or she was considered that. So it's and I agree. Again, we look at it in a way that there's societies like, I believe in Christianity. If Mary was a prophet, I believe there were other women like Mary Magdalene. I think she was not given the the right, how do I say it? The right,
yeah, I think I've heard that too, but she wasn't given her due, her due role as maybe like an apostle, because he had 12 apostles follow him originally, and like she was actually one of them, but is not named.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
and why she wasn't named? She wasn't named because when back again in Europe, when they kind of were pulling together the Gospels and all that. And I believe it was a Roman ruler. Who was it that kind of brought the 5 Gospels? They chose out of there's more Gospels, but they chose the 5 Gospels. Who was it?
Constantine.
Yeah.
Council. There was a Council of Nicaea and Council. Yeah.
And we think about it. What if there was a gospel written by Mary Magdalene? What if there was, and I think there was actually, but I haven't seen it or I haven't read it or anything like that. But what if there was a gospel written by Mary, Jesus's mother? So what if there was these gospels? And I think there were writings by these women. And on top of it, one of the ways you would suppress somebody, and whether it be women or anybody enslaved, is don't educate them. If you don't educate somebody, they're going to be put in a position where they're second class, and it's once you educate. That's why women in the United States, they were back in the 50s or 40s or 30s, whatever, they were breaking free and wanting to get educated and getting, at least learning, maybe they don't go into the workforce, but they're getting educated. That education is the strength that puts them, out there to really speak for themselves and become, politicians. They go into the workforce. So when these men were to suppress the women, one of the ways is you don't educate them. And if you don't educate them, in the mind of these men is like, great, we're in control. The women can't do anything now.
Slavery. It's the same mentality with slaves here.
Yeah, they're like indentured servants, basically, in a way. And some kind of thought. But yeah, it's just wild just to think about it. But I'm glad the world is evolving, and we've come out of that. Like I call it the dark ages for women. I'm so happy that happened, because women are easily equivalent to men intellectually, religiously, everything. Sure. There's nothing, there's no difference between the two. And Dr. Slav was right that there's no women that started any wars offensively. So,
no, but it's,
but I can think of.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You touch upon how the Western world went from, until when the suffrages movement, right, rose in the United States and also in England, that just ripple effect of in the Western world, calling for equal opportunity, civil rights for women. Women are, coming out of all the factories and the trenches and from poverty, owning their own business. But the way back when Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, his first wife, the love of his life, Sittina Khadija, she owned her own business. She was one of his clients, actually, that he fell in love with her. She was 20 years his senior. He met her, he was 20. She was 40 years old, established woman with her own business. And she was, Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam, allegedly, he was illiterate. She knew how to read and write. He didn't. So right there and then, that model of attraction between the two figures, that Sayyidina Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam really appreciated strong women around him. He thrived around strong women. That's why all his wives and all his daughters, he never had a son as an heir. He adopted a boy, but he never had his own biological son. All his offsprings were girls and females, and he just loved surrounding himself around strong women. Biggest example, my father, he thrived around strong women. I noticed, my father-in-law, Abu Ihab, Allah yarhamu yahsin ilayh, he loved, although he quarreled and he fought with my mother-in-law, but he thrived around strong women, including myself. When I was around him, he will argue. When I stepped in the conversation, he will actually submit, because he appreciated and admired strong women. And I can see that in Ihab. His mother-in-law is very strong. His mom is very strong. I am strong. His aunts are all strong women that he grew up around them. And he thrives when he is around, and he is attracted to strong women. So you cannot deny the effect of strong female around males. But unfortunately, some male figures around history that created havoc, that created chaos, because they were threatened by strong women around them. And the only way to satisfy their narrative or help them rise above that to be noticed is to suppress the women around them. And unfortunately, we see it repeatedly through history. And when you trace that, it's because one male is controlling the narrative. And unfortunately, some female figures help those men suppress other women, hoping to gain the favor of that man who is holding the agenda, who's controlling the narrative. But that is also, if you look at it, that's a very smart move too, because they needed to survive the whole environment and the whole culture. But I hate to say it, we have reached the end of our hour. Thank you so much for Dr. Ihab and JD Yusuf for coming in today to share with us all this data and the storytelling too. And as a reminder, these episodes are uploaded every Wednesday on the Spotify and the Apple Podcast platform. And also these episodes are available for you to watch on the Greenwood Dental Partners YouTube channel. So if you guys like this content and love our storytelling, please like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification button. That way you won't miss any episodes. And please try to review us. We'll take 5 stars if you don't mind. That way it will help us continue making this content. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And I hope to see you next time. This is Slava, the Jordanian.